that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. So lovely earth can stay lovely still.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and the famous Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
Who has been referred to as the famous Tom Fennell in the flesh dozens of times. Which means you know it's true. Every day I get up early. Today I got up at 3 o'clock.
Wow.
3 o'clock. Well, you know, I couldn't sleep. What can I say? That's why I get up early. You know, all this thing of energy, that's because I keep getting up early. I don't know what to do.
And here I've been impressed with
with how hard I work. Well, anyway, every day I get up. Every day for over 5 years I've done this, and get up and I put together the energy news that I find interesting. Which I get through searches online, and I go through hundreds of articles, or at least
some of them come up. You get some weird ones, but they're good. Good articles, nevertheless.
Yeah. Well, I go through hundreds of headlines.
Vanuatu
truth
Times.
be told, yeah, Vanuatu Times. I go through hundreds of headlines and looking for news on energy and climate change. And when I find one that I like, I put together a synopsis of about 50 or 55 words. And put that together with a link to the source of the article, and put that up on the on my blog, which is geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com, and we will try to keep you informed of what day these items appeared on my blog, and they're within the last 24 hours. But if I find something that I hadn't seen before and it's several days old, I'll still put it up for that.
It might have the wrong date on it.
Yeah, I would have a date that's a little bit older than the others, but
I'm sure that if they want to look hard enough, they'll find it.
Oh yeah.
And some of these are worth finding.
But
we can't cover them
in
the depth that the article covers them. We don't have the time.
If they go to the blog and they go to the date that we say, they'll find it there, and when they click on it, they'll go to an article that might be a few days older. But nevertheless, they'll get to it, or hopefully they'll get to it, because not all these links are live. I try to test them.
Yeah, most of them work.
And I finally figured out a way to do that using the Google Chrome web search thing.
The search engine, yeah.
Yeah, you can actually, using Google Chrome, which I'm using for my web browser, you can click on a thing that says that you're going incognito.
Oh yeah?
And that means that the computer that you're on is not telling the computer that you're referencing what it is, or at least not the same way. And so you can confuse the computer that you're going to.
Yep. And
so you can reference something, and then I get the link to it, come back, put that link on that second window, and go to it from there.
Uh-huh.
And the first time it might say, this is coming through Google search engine, so I'm going to show it. And the second time it might say, this is just some guy getting on the site, I'm not going to show it.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I find the paywalls that way sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's why
sometimes I can't get them because of paywalls.
Yeah. I'm
able to bypass.
Yeah.
I go search.
I'm getting better at this, but you know, like the Brattleboro Reformer, which for crying out loud is our local paper.
They want money.
They if an article is 7 days old, they won't show it to you.
They won't even show it to you.
I want these things to show up for anybody who visits.
Yeah, right.
And even if it's over 7 days old, and it's got to be over 7 days old. I've got to do that for this show, because people could be watching this show 2 weeks after an article appeared, and we're talking about it. So I never use the Brattleboro Reformer for a reference to an article. I see something on the Brattleboro, unless I have to. I see something on the Brattleboro Reformer, and then I go for a Google search for that article to see if the same information shows up somewhere else.
Which it usually does.
Usually does. Not always. Not for local news. Anyway, we're talking about this stuff in much too much detail. But we've got an article here from the New York Times, which I found fascinating. And
Yeah, we got a picture here.
that's a picture of Cape Grim, which is in Tasmania. And, you know, it's got the freshest air in the world.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
For those who were not in the know, Tasmania is kind of a heart-shaped island, large heart-shaped island off the south coast of Australia.
Yep.
And this particular point is in the extreme northwest corner of the Tasmanian heart.
Yeah.
And the wind that's hitting there starts off in Africa.
So it's been out at sea for thousands of miles, getting scrubbed by whatever rains it goes through. So there's very, very little in the way of the air is as fresh as you can find.
It's kind of a pretty spot.
It is, rather, yeah.
Nice beach.
Anyway, what's the title of this article, Tom?
The title of this one, I'll have to backtrack a second here. Carbon in atmosphere is rising even as emissions stabilize. That's a significant point.
Yep, this is troublesome. Scientists are concerned about an unknown cause of a rise in atmospheric carbon dioxide. In one of the most hopeful signs since global climate crisis became widely known, the amount of carbon dioxide that people are pumping into the air seems to have stabilized. Nevertheless, the amount that is in the air is still increasing. And that's not good news. I have a hunch of where this is coming from. And my bet is that it's coming from soil degradation due to bad agricultural practices.
In Africa.
All over the world.
All over the world.
And we are guilty of this probably as much as anybody in the United States.
Because all we want to do is use artificial fertilizer.
We want to use fake fertilizers, and we want to use GMOs, and really, I mean, there's a connection between all of these things. So,
definitely. I mean, artificial fertilizers are great for a while.
Yeah, for a while. And then they don't work anymore, and when they don't work anymore, then you've got bad soil, and you don't know. When I lived in Illinois as a little kid, there was a local contractor who dug a foundation for a house. Okay, he went down as far. This is going to be a full-sized basement in a house. Never broke through topsoil.
No kidding.
Yeah, the topsoil in some parts of Illinois was like 18 feet thick or something. Why? Nobody had ever farmed that. So it was just building up and building up and building up this thick soil. And plants that had very deep roots could take advantage of that. Well, you start farming and adding chemical fertilizers, which you have to do after a few years.
Oh, yeah.
You start depleting things that are not in the chemical fertilizers themselves, but are in the soil. So the soil degrades, and degrades. And eventually, the soil is so degraded that you can't use it anymore.
Got to move on.
Yeah. Okay.
That's one of the reasons behind the Dust Bowl, wasn't it?
I think it might have been, yeah. It was agricultural practices, they said, caused the Dust Bowl. I don't know exactly what there were. Anyway, I suppose we should move on. Do you have something to say about this?
I'm just trying to, well, they're not able to figure out why this is happening. And there's a number of suggestions, but they're still shrugging their shoulders.
Yeah.
The takeaway here is that Trump is trying to cut the funding to an American entity that's in part funding this research.
Yeah.
And they're getting money from NASA. This is an atmospheric laboratory, and it's in that. I'm going to pull the picture back up.
Okay.
It's in that, on that promontory there.
That's a NASA laboratory?
Well, it's not a NASA laboratory. It's a laboratory it's a climate laboratory.
That supplies information.
That is partly funded by NASA.
Okay. But Trump and the Republican leadership in Washington wants us basically to be blindfolded and have earmuffs put on so we can't hear anything and we don't smell anything, And, when you are told that something is dangerous and you persist in doing it anyway, despite the fact that you've been told that it is dangerous,
that's a little bit dumb.
You are not just dumb, it's culpable.
Yeah.
It is culpable in court.
I hear you.
And these guys, I'm talking about Scott Pruitt and Donald Trump and so forth. Donald Trump is not going to be president forever. And
He
when
thinks he is.
well, maybe he will be president until he dies, but let's hope for better things. Let's hope that he gets out of this and realizes at some point what he's done. But what he's done, I believe, is culpable in court. And when you can show that these people are responsible for other people dying in large numbers, as groups of people who are ethnic groups, such as the people who live in the Marshall Islands or whatever, now you're talking about crimes against humanity. And when they get drummed out of office, which they will at some point, I'm not going to be at all surprised if they and the people who paid for them to be elected wind up going to Brussels to face trial.
It's a possibility.
They should be thinking about this. And Scott Pruitt, for crying out loud, is a lawyer. He should understand the implications of what he's doing. But he is acting like he doesn't. And in my opinion, that's because he's paid to act like he doesn't by people who are undermining our democracy. Okay, should we move out of that?
Yeah, I think we can. We've talked about this utility before. Mississippi Utility will stop efforts to complete a coal plant.
Don't you love this?
I think we talked about
this
it
actually
last week.
comes up twice in this
Yeah,
this thing. Federal News Radio.com. Mississippi Power Company faced with an ultimatum from state regulators. Ultimatum. Said it will suspend efforts to build a coal-fueled power plant with carbon capture. The cost of the plant ballooned from $2.9 billion to $7.5 billion. That's a big increase. And
I would say, yeah.
And it is 3 years behind schedule. This sounds like a nuclear power plant, not a coal-burning power plant.
There's a backstory here.
Yeah.
It's not just burning coal, it's burning lignite,
Yeah.
which is the cheapest and most corruptive form of coal that exists.
Yeah.
They call it brown coal.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the energy content that black coal has.
Yeah.
There's a lot more other stuff in it. It's like one step above peat,
Yeah.
and they're trying to gasify this and
Getting a lot of sulfur, among other things.
and burn the gas in turbines,
Yeah.
which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But it isn't working.
Yeah. And at least it isn't working well. They will instead be running on, instead of running on so-called clean coal, this plant will run on natural gas.
Yeah, well.
So they're going to have a
There's still going to be a plant there, but it's not going to be run. The clean coal part of it just blew up. It just wasn't doable.
Yeah, economically blew up.
And it's interesting. It cost $3.5 billion more than they planned for it. And guess who's paying for the $3.5 billion?
Who?
The ratepayers.
Well, by golly, how could that happen?
Well, it happens very easily. In exchange for getting a monopoly,
Yeah.
the company is guaranteed a profit.
Yes.
And so if they're losing money, the rates have to go up. And who pays the rates? The ratepayers.
Yes.
That's why they call them ratepayers.
That's right. The alternative for that, by the way, is to have the taxpayers pay it, because the company isn't going to pay
The company's not going to. The investor's not going to pay
No.
for it.
Unless the company goes bankrupt and out of business and the investors are holding the bag, in which case the people who ran the whole show are not going to pay for it.
Well,
So
a quick takeaway from this.
Yeah.
This is a quote from the article. It's time to recognize this is a myth. It is absolutely clear that coal is a thing of the past for electricity generation.
yes, absolutely. Coal is gone the way of the
Buggy whips.
slide rule, buggy whips, manual typewriters, that whole thing. Buggies. Okay, then our next item is from the solar industry. We have to move along a little faster here, Tom.
This is a good article.
Yes.
It's time to move beyond the, quote, base load mentality for the U.S. grid.
This is very interesting, and I think it's very true. The nation's electric grid operators are increasingly turning to more flexible resources and low-cost renewable options like wind and solar, rendering outdated notions that base load generating plants are required to reliably power American homes and businesses, according to a new report by the Brattle Group, which has nothing to do with Brattleboro. But the whole business plan that we've got for generating electricity is in question.
It's over. I mean, this made a lot of sense in the 20th century.
Yeah.
It really did. I
Yeah.
mean, they had these huge plants like Niagara Falls
Yeah.
providing baseload power, which is the power that you generally have to provide all the time.
Right.
And then if you needed more, they called it peaking power.
Yeah.
We've talked about that.
Yes.
Sometimes the peaking power was extremely expensive.
Extremely.
So the
And-
concept of baseload made sense in the 20th century,
Yeah.
but it doesn't anymore.
And the one of the interesting things about peaking power is that, traditionally, the time that peaking power demand really hits hard is when it's hot outside and everybody wants an air conditioner.
Yeah. Everybody's
And when,
got their AC
when it's
on.
hot outside, the sun is shining, and when the sun is shining, the solar panels will be making power. So solar panels usually make power at just the time that peaking power.
Well, that's changing the economics
It
a
is.
lot.
It
Because
is. It's changing the
instead of
economics.
paying $50 a kilowatt hour, they're paying $5 a kilowatt hour.
That's exactly right. So.
Let's move along. This is very interesting, this next one coming up. I'll get a picture of it.
Yeah, it is. This is from Friday, June 30th, by the way. And
Yeah. I mentioned this last week because I had seen it.
yeah.
And I'm glad we get a chance to take a look at it.
Oh, I
That's
could have.
that's
This article has so many pictures, and this is just
Yeah.
one of them.
This is one of the articles you should look at. Really.
Yeah,
This,
really.
This is a fun article.
This is from CNN.
Can you imagine living in that place?
Well,
Every one of those buildings has plants all over it.
and the reason why those buildings look a little bit like honeycombs is because every apartment in those buildings has got a balcony, and every balcony has a tree growing on it. So this is a very different sort of thing. But
Well, let's.
What's
I'll
the
read the
title?
headline
Yeah.
here because the headline tells it a lot. China unveils plans for the world's first pollution-eating forest city.
pollution eating.
Eating.
In 2016, China's State Council released guidelines forbidding the construction of, quote, bizarre, end quote.
Well, there's some bizarre buildings. There's one of them
boy,
looks
are
like a
they.
teapot.
Yeah, and quote, odd-shaped, end quote, buildings lacking character or cultural heritage. I got to tell you, from the way I look at Chinese buildings, the cultural heritage buildings look a little bizarre to me. But nevertheless, they want to focus on economic, green, and beautiful. Newly unveiled plans for Luizhou, I don't know how to pronounce Chinese, forest city, designed by Stefano Boeri Architetti, which is obviously
Sounds Italian.
huh?
Sounds Italian to me.
It is Italian. They have Little Italy in Shanghai. I'm kidding. For southern China seems to fit the bill. And really, there are so many photographs, and they are not all of that city. There are other proposed sorts of cities. I was planning on putting one up that was titled something like Forest City in the Mountains. Okay. And when I looked at it, I realized, wait a minute, that's not the forest city they're talking about. That's a different proposed. And apparently this is something that, these are bizarre.
There's a quick takeaway about what Forest City is.
Yeah.
350 acres, self-contained neighborhood. More than 70 buildings, homes, hospitals, hotels, schools, and offices.
Yeah.
It's all there.
Yeah.
All of which will be covered by 40,000 trees and almost 1 million plants.
Yeah.
Eventually, up to 30,000 people could call the Forest City home. And the final sentence is, bringing forests into the city is a way to reduce climate change.
Yes. Okay. We should move on. Our next item is from Renew Economy.
Energy storage already cost competitive in the commercial sector.
Global Research Institute, McKinsey and Company, analyzed, I remember Ella Fitzgerald singing a song in which she... It was
loved Ella.
McKinsey report. I did too. Analyzed currency, energy storage prices, and concluded that commercial customers were already feeling the economic benefits of cheaper batteries and falling prices for lithium-ion technology. Battery pack prices, the costs are now down to less than $230 per kilowatt hour compared to $1,000 per kilowatt hour in 2010. Now what that means is the equipment that's used to store 1 kilowatt hour of electricity, which we buy for, what, 16 cents, 18 cents, something.
Yeah, 15, 14, yeah.
Yeah. Used to cost $1,000, now it costs $230. That same equipment, of course, can be used every day, day in and day out.
Bingo.
It's a battery, and some of the batteries they've got, they have no idea how long they will last.
Well, some of them are made to be recharged.
Yes, they are.
Going down to
Yeah.
zero, recharged, and
Yes, and the effect of this is that if you look at the cost of the battery of the electricity over the lifetime of the battery, even though the battery costs $230 per kilowatt hour, the electricity
You got
that
a lot of
it
hours
delivers,
there.
you got a lot of hours. The electricity that it delivers is possibly 1.5 to 2 cents per kilowatt hour higher. If they're going to buy electricity when nobody wants it,
and store it.
and the price of electricity has historically, for the first time in the last couple of weeks, hit negative ranges for some customers buying wholesale power. If you buy electricity at a negative price and you store it, and then you deliver it back to the grid at a high grid demand price, which might be as high as 60 cents per kilowatt hour. You could be buying something you could be paid 2 cents to take the electricity and get 60 cents for giving it back again.
My God, how the money rolls in.
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of chance for that, but there is, does happen.
This is fixed. This is setting itself up to be a game changer.
Yes.
Because at least large power consumers are going to be making as much of their power as they can.
Absolutely they are.
And so the utility who's supplying the power to them is going to be losing all of that market.
Well, the utilities make out,
Most of them do. If they're managing their properties right, like Green Mountain Power,
right,
they will be making out.
Yep.
Some of the ones we've talked about are adopting a tough stance. They're going to lose out.
Yes. In what they have to do is figure out how to go to a new business plan. And on a new business plan,
those that do will survive.
Absolutely.
Those that don't will not.
Yeah.
And that's happening as we speak.
Well, what we're trying to do right now is to make America great again by refusing to move into the future. I'm not sure how we can do that, but that's what we want to do.
That's a good point.
We're promoting obsolete technology and expecting to. It's like, what would have happened if
the next article is on exactly that?
Yeah, and the next article comes from an organization called Inverse. Got a title?
Yeah, Trump announces 6-point plan to make money on U.S. fossil fuels.
President Donald Trump frequently used the word wealth on Wednesday when describing natural resources like coal, natural gas, heavy crude oil, before laying out 6 ways American businesses could sell off those resources for a profit. That is to say, not that they're selling off their access to those sources, but they're selling coal, natural gas, crude oil for a profit. Trump wants to...
That's what they do.
That's what they do. Trump wants to revitalize the nuclear energy sector as well. Aside from that, he's promoting fossil fuels. And so, anybody want a buggy whip?
This was called the Unleashing American Energy event.
Yeah, well...
And Trump is, he's pontificating. The golden era of American energy is now underway. Drum roll.
It's mind-boggling.
He's got a 6-point plan, which is worth reading if you want to.
Yeah.
I have the 6 points, but I'm not going to read them on the show.
Basically, you can sum them up in one sentence. Deny anything is happening and just keep trying to do what isn't working.
Good point.
There you go. Okay, we're up to Saturday, June 1st, and this item comes from ECORI.com, EchoRhodeIsland.com. And yeah, we've got a map.
Got a map of the Northeast Pipeline project.
Which is not going to happen.
Well, much of that is already in place.
Yeah, but it's not going to be finished.
All that they're planning in this thing was a big upgrade of that.
Yeah.
And it isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Northeast natural gas pipeline project suspended.
A natural gas infrastructure project slated for southern New England came to a screeching halt on June 29th when Houston-based Spectra Energy Partners announced that the controversial Access Northeast project is being suspended. The Algonquin natural gas pipeline included a series of extensions between New York and Massachusetts.
Well, they say it's suspended, but I think it's canceled.
Yeah, it's dead.
And this is the second such pipeline in the Northeast that has been canceled.
Yeah,
in the
and
last
we've got our next item, by the way, speaks to why it's being canceled. So maybe we should go
Let's
straight
talk
to
about
that.
that one.
This is
Oil
from Grist.
companies are just not that into Keystone XL.
This is from Grist. Lately, crude oil hasn't looked like a great investment. Keystone XL Pipeline's operator, TransCanada, is struggling to track down oil producers and refiners who want to invest in transporting crude oil from Canada to the United States. When it proposed the pipeline extension in 2008, a barrel of crude cost $130. Now it's down to $45. Now, you know...
So they're having a party and nobody wants to come.
Tom, they're doing this for strictly economic reasons, but they would have been far better off if they listened to all those Indians.
Yeah.
You know,
what do they know? They're only Indians.
Yeah, my gosh, they should have stayed in the UK or wherever their ancestors came from. This is not smart. I mean, they were saying we shouldn't take the moral high ground. That's expensive. I got news for you. The moral low ground can be expensive, and it you know, here it is.
Well, it's interesting because this Keystone XL pipeline hasn't been completely built yet.
I had thought that it was.
They've got a lot of approvals, but they still have to get approval from the state of Nebraska.
Oh, okay.
Which isn't saying anything yet.
Aha. Okay.
So this may not even happen.
Well, you know, they've put a lot of money into it.
Oh, yeah.
And they have broken a lot of laws, as a matter of fact.
And spent a lot of money on...
Breaking a lot of laws. Buying off politicians.
Bingo, that's what I was going to say. Crossing palms.
But, I mean... we've got a political party that is being supported by a group of businessmen who are all going out in the middle of the night and baying at the moon. I mean, it's crazy. And, you know, somebody said to me, well, big business is just wrecking everything. And I've got news for you, and I said this at the time. It's not big business, because most of big business is not in favor of this.
Yeah.
You know, and you can go down the list. You can go to series.org and look at the number of businesses that have signed on to their thing of lobbying in favor of saving the world. And you find companies like General Mills and General Motors, Ford and Nike. You know, you just go down this list.
There's
trillions
a small
of dollars.
number of very large companies that support this.
That's right. A very small number of very large companies run by a very small number of people.
Very wealthy people.
Who have very small minds. Should we move on?
We shall move on.
Okay, we've got a beautiful picture here.
Yeah, let me get this picture up. It is
it's pretty.
Kind of nice.
One thing about this picture that bothers me is that it's very slightly tilted, and it makes me feel kind of.
It is tilted, isn't it?
A little off base.
It is a little bit. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, this comes from Pacific Business News.
Hawaii Electric files plan to modernize grids on 5 islands for renewables.
Hawaiian Electric Company submitted a draft of its plan to modernize the power grids on the 5 islands it serves to bring more renewable resources online. The plan shows how the grid modernization will help achieve a consolidated renewable portfolio standard of 48% by 2020. Now and the standard they've got,
almost half.
Yeah, the standard they've got calls for 30% by 2020. Yep. Like many, many, many organizations, companies, states, countries, whatever. Dong Energy being a really good example, they're way ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
And the reason for this is because renewable energy that replaces the fossil fuels is inexpensive and is put up quickly and produces very few problems. And there are a lot of people.
Once they figured out how to do one, they can do 100.
Yeah.
What's that like turbines?
Yeah,
bing,
absolutely.
Bing, 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 bing.
That's right.
There's a technical takeaway here.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. This is from the article. It says, our grids were originally designed for one-way flow of electricity to customers from a handful of power plants. That was the 20th century model.
Yeah.
We can use advanced technology to transform these grids into two-way power flow from nearly 80,000 privately owned rooftop tower systems today.
Advanced technology.
And tens of thousands of more in the future.
It's called a computer.
So the flow of electricity in the 21st century is going two ways instead of one way.
Yeah.
And that's it in a nutshell.
That's it
and
in a
that's
nutshell.
the new model.
That's the new model. And they, the people who are opposed to this just don't understand. I don't know. Maybe they think computers don't work.
And that's what it is. I mean, we talked about virtual utilities.
Yeah.
Hold up your computer again.
Yeah, there it is. Here. Isn't
That's
that beautiful?
That could be a virtual utility.
It could be. Absolutely, it could. And it's, I bought this thing from an online company called Newegg for $149.
Can't beat that.
And it'll run for like
eight watts or something like that?
It draws 5 watts, and it'll run for 8 hours on its battery. And it weighs like two pounds. And the world has changed. Now, as a computer engineer, one of the things I sat down and I thought about computer memory, and I thought, wait a minute, we've got 9 transistors for each bit. No, it wasn't 9. It was, well, I forget. It was, say, 6. 6 transistors for each bit, and 9 bits for each byte, because you had a CRC bit to make sure that the byte hadn't been corrupted. So if you had a 1 megawatt machine, which was the way the original IBM PC was, if it was fully decked out, which it never was, they restricted it to 640 kilobytes. But in a 1 megabyte machine, you'd have 9 million bytes with 54 million transistors, and if one of those transistors failed, and on top of it, the whole thing could come crashing down, and on top of that, each of those bits had to be reset 200 times every second.
Okay.
How could it work? How could this possibly work? And now we've got people saying, we're selling oil, but we want to tell you that this isn't going to work, this computer you've got.
Well, I remember when I was in college, the campus computer was in its own building.
Yes.
It was a 3-story building.
Yes.
And I'm sure that computer you got in front of you is more powerful.
The first computer that I had as a personal computer was much faster, had much more memory, twice as much memory, as the first computer that I worked with in college.
Okay.
And that computer that I had was not much bigger than this. It cost $1,000. It was 16 kilobytes.
16K.
It had no disk drives.
Wow.
It had to be. You had to record things on a tape.
Yeah, audio tape.
Audio tape.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it had no modem built in. It had basically nothing. It did have a keyboard. It did have a CRT display, which the computer in college did not have. Neither one of those. But the computer in college did have 3 things that my computer didn't have, which were air conditioners to cool it off.
Yeah.
I mean, things have changed. Well, I got news for you. The energy industry is changing as fast as the computer industry did. Okay, we're up to Sunday, January 2nd, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
Okay.
As Beijing joins the climate fight, Chinese companies build coal plants. Can you say hypocrisy?
Can you? This is Sunday, July 2nd, and it's from the New York Times. It's Sunday, July 2nd at the GeoHarvey.com
Yeah,
blog.
right.
When China halted plans for more than 100 new coal-fired power plants this year, even as President Trump vowed to bring back coal, the contrast seemed to confirm Beijing's leadership in the fight against climate change. But China's energy companies are building or planning to build more than 700 new coal plants worldwide.
Well, this is from the article. Many of the plants that they're building are in China, but roughly 1/5 of these new coal power stations are in other countries. Of the world's 20 biggest coal plant developers, 11 are Chinese. China's, and this is a quote from the article, China's climate concerns have so far been driven by narrow concerns over local pollution, for now, those concerns seem to not extend elsewhere.
Yes, well, the Chinese have a funny thing going on here that should be thought about, and that is they can make money by building coal plants that get canceled.
Yeah.
You know,
That's an interesting
why
concept.
not? They don't have to worry about air pollution if the plants never go into operation.
That's an interesting
Now,
concept.
we know, because we reported it on this show, that there was a big coal-burning power plant in Belgium that went online and folded
What was
a
that?
year and a half.
For about a year and a half.
Yeah,
Then
year
they
and a half
closed it.
later, because it was not
Wasn't competitive.
competitive.
Yeah.
So why should they worry about pollution that's never going to come?
Well, I didn't even think of that aspect.
They get paid for building the power plant. Donald Trump gets paid for delivering the coal. The power plant never gets finished, so the coal never gets delivered.
Interesting.
The Chinese make money, and Donald Trump gets the credit for being a failure.
He's in this article too.
Yeah.
It says the United States may also be back in the game on Thursday. This was last Thursday.
Yeah.
Mr. Trump said he wanted to lift Obama-era restrictions on American financing for overseas coal projects as part of an energy policy focused on exports. And he says this exact thing. We will export American energy all over the world.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, we will see.
we'd better not, because if we do, we're going to be in trouble. Okay, our next item comes from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
There we go.
And there is
nice picture of
the
Oklahoma
Bizzell Library,
U,
or the Bizzell Library. I think it's probably Bizzell.
I would guess. Oklahoma U researchers in orbit over $160 million NASA contract.
Now, this is interesting that under Donald Trump they'd get this NASA contract, isn't it?
Oh, it's been sitting in there.
I know, it's not his contract. The University of Oklahoma has long been long known for weather and climate research, but a high-ranking administrator says an 8-year, $161 million project that has just been formally begun puts the Oklahoma University in an entirely new orbit. The contract involves development, deployment, and operation of the Geostationary Carbon Cycle Observatory.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
Their contract was to create instruments that will monitor vegetation
Yes.
and gases from space,
Yes.
all bundled up in a 5-foot cube that they're going to attach to somebody else's satellite.
There you go.
Bingo.
Yeah. So,
And I'll give you a quick one. Its mission is a daily infrared scan of Western Hemisphere foliage, producing data for monitoring vegetation, and by doing so, gauging CO, CO2, and methane levels and the processes that produce them.
yes.
And this coming up is a good one. Geoscan, which is the box, okay, will also help identify sources of methane leakage during natural gas production, which is becoming a major issue.
Right. Now, should we go on?
Yeah.
Okay. Our next item is from Clean Technica, and it is the second of the two articles on that
Yeah, this
coal
is a
burning plant.
duplication of item number 2 that we talked about.
Yes.
Utilities spend $7.5 billion to prove clean coal is a cruel hoax.
In 2010, Southern Company began construction of a clean coal generating facility in Mississippi. Working on a $3.5 billion budget, its mission was to prove the technology worked. Now, 3 years overdue and $4 billion over budget, the company has given up. And there's more in this article. You know, this can actually
It goes more into detail about the lignite and
Yeah.
the processes
Yeah.
and why they failed and why they didn't fail. And it's
Right, and
interesting article.
Basically, what's happening here is the whole business of using coal and then capturing the carbon dioxide is extremely expensive, and we're getting to.
They're finding that out.
Yeah.
They're really finding out. I think the article says it can't be done.
Well, it can be done. I mean, it's been shown
Well,
that it's possible to be done, but
I misspoke.
economically,
Economically, it can't be done.
it's outside. And of course, maybe somebody will come up with a way of doing it. But the thing that really bothers me about it is, okay, so if we spend all that money doing it, and it turns out we can do it economically, then what do we do with all that carbon dioxide?
We got to pump it down under the earth into
You
a salt mine.
can't do that. It'll come back out again. Okay, it's the genie that's out of the bottle, and you're trying to put it back in again.
Interesting.
Yeah. We are up to Monday, July 3rd, and we've got a
picture here
picture and,
coming up,
and an article from ecobusiness.com, and that's a nice picture. I like
well,
that picture.
I'm a train buff, so I love this picture.
Yeah.
Hydrogen fuel reaches liftoff. And that's an electric train that's driven by a trolley wire.
That's right. And in the article, you learn that you could ditch the trolley wire.
That's what they're saying. I find that hard to believe. I mean, they talked about it two ways. They said it's definitely cheaper than converting diesel engines to trolley wire.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
If the trolley wires aren't there, it's definitely cheaper to go bypass completely, go to hydrogen fuel. Yeah. But they also say in here, they plan, well, it can be competitive with some of these electric trains. And
yes.
I find that one hard to believe, where the wires are already in place.
Well, let's read what this thing says, and then we can talk a little more.
Hydrogen fuel reaches liftoff.
Using surplus electricity from renewables to make hydrogen fuel is a starting for a new era of all forms of heavy transport. Trucks, trains, and ships using hydrogen fuel cells for propulsion are no longer just theoretically possible. They've reached the trial stage, and using hydrogen for fuel has come to make economic sense. Now, the article doesn't go into the thing that we talked about last week, which was using the hydrogen to make formic acid.
No, that's a whole different approach.
The beauty of that particular approach is that in terms of the density, you can get about 360 times as much hydrogen.
Then you can store it.
Than you can store as a gas.
Yeah. You can't
in
store
the formic acid. But what you're putting into the atmosphere, if you capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to make the formic acid with the hydrogen, what you're putting into the atmosphere is exactly what you took out. So it's
bingo.
It's neutral. Now, what's going to happen is that renewable energy, as you know, doesn't go full time. So you have to make more of it than you actually need at any given time. So
when the sun, you make hay while the sun shines.
That's exactly right. And what they're talking about here is how do you use the excess electricity that you could get when the renewables are going and nobody wants it.
Yep.
And if you do that, you can get fuel, which is basically cost negative or zero cost.
So if you're looking at it that way, if you're buying the electricity cheap enough, it makes sense.
Now they don't really go into that.
No, they don't.
But you know that's
a valid thought, though.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. This next picture is beautiful.
It's kind of interesting.
This is from Brink.
From who?
Brink. B-R-I-N-K. All in uppercase.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Electrifying emerging Southeast Asian nations through off-grid, I can't even say it. Electrifying emerging Southeast Asian nations through off-grid distributed renewable energy systems.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful.
It is.
This picture is really neat.
It is. Some 134 million people in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations region do not have access to electricity. And for many of those who have electricity, the supply is unstable. Off-grid distributed energy systems using renewable energy could be a solution to the problem thanks to the increasing availability of new renewable energy technologies. And that is those thatched
That's
buildings.
The Green School.
That is what's called the Green School. And
quick takeaway on that.
Yeah.
The Green School campus is built using sustainable natural material, which is what it looks like.
Yep.
And is powered by over 100 solar panels that provide over 80% of the school's energy needs.
Which are scattered all over the hillside.
They seem to be all pointing in different directions.
They're all kind of put up willy-nilly, but by golly, they're providing electricity to a bunch of people who are studying and working in buildings that have thatched roofs. I don't know what that material is that's on the peak of the roof, but it's not a solar material.
No, it's not.
One of the weaknesses of the thatched model is that the very peak of the roof can leak. So
that's probably what that's there for.
Yeah, in the UK they wouldn't have had something like that because they didn't need it because it didn't rain enough. But in a place like Indonesia, you might have a bunch of rain coming during a monsoon season. But those funny things on the tops of the roofs are not solar panels, but the solar panels are very clearly visible there. I think
the point of all of this is using such renewable energy technologies can either be integrated into local distribution grids or uses standalone systems
Yep.
in areas where the extension of transmission lines is not economically viable.
Yes.
So what they're saying is this is just another mechanism that's going to bring power to the people who've never had power before.
Absolutely. Now, we are up to Tuesday, July 4th.
But we still got one more.
Do we? Yeah, we've got an item
We've
from the
got 2 items
Huffington
in this
Post.
one, yeah. One more item from this one.
Yeah.
Climate justice groups and big oil agree on climate dividends. This is a biggie too.
This is big. With the country seemingly paralyzed by polarization, 2 separate announcements in California and Washington, D.C. last week heralded strange bedfellows coming together to advocate for climate dividends. They include environmentalists in California and big business, including some of the largest oil and gas companies.
I was wondering what climate dividends were, and I checked it out, and they are actual cash payments to the people.
Yeah. We've got big oil
dividend
companies.
checks, direct deposits, contributions,
Right.
and they want the Social Security Administration to handle it.
Yeah, we've got big companies, ExxonMobil being one of them. Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil, who is now the Secretary of Energy, who are advocating in favor of a carbon tax in order to deal with carbon pollution that's causing. And
what do they do with the money from the carbon tax? In this article,
Yep.
they give it back to the people.
Well, in Brattleboro, we're talking about in Vermont a statewide carbon tax,
yeah.
and one of the possibilities for that is that we could eliminate the sales tax. And that sales tax has always been a bone of contention for people in Brattleboro because across the river in Hinsdale, New Hampshire, there's no sales tax. So people
Bingo.
go across the river to shop
That's
instead of shopping.
That's why Walmart's over there.
Yeah,
And the same thing's up by Lebanon.
yeah.
Same thing, the whole magic mile of
Right.
shops.
Although I don't regret the fact that Walmart is not in Brattleboro,
But it's reality.
It is
They
reality.
moved it over there because there was no sales tax.
Yep. We have to
And
move
by
ahead.
the way, you can buy fireworks over there too,
Yes.
which are illegal in Vermont.
Yes, we have to move ahead. We've got 13 minutes to do 6 items.
We can do that.
Yeah. Okay, our next item is from Gulf Today, and it's on the 4th of July.
World's first floating offshore wind farm prepares to set sail. This is an interesting article
It is.
too.
The world's first commercial scale floating wind farm, which will be sited. You put it up so people can see it, Tom.
Yeah, I thought I had it up already. No, I don't.
Oh, maybe you had it up and I didn't notice.
No, I didn't have it up. I'm looking at it on here.
It will be sited 25 kilometers off the coast of Scotland, is nearer to being a reality. According to a press statement, each of the five megawatt wind turbines has been attached to a floating substructure in Norway, and they are now ready to be towed into position and anchored on the seabed. And this is important because you can put these things in any water that is too deep for a stationary foundation. But all you need is to make it shallow enough that you can anchor it, and shallow enough that you can anchor it. I don't know how far you can go down. You use cables.
Yeah,
but
that's irrelevant.
Yeah, it's just a matter of
So they're moving further out to sea.
Yeah.
And they're talking about it. I don't know if we're going to talk about it here or not. I think we are in California.
In California.
Because there's no continental shelf in California.
Right. We should move on, if you don't mind. Our next item is from chron.com. We're still on the 4th of July.
Global solar installations jumped 50% in 2016.
This is big. The amount of solar energy installed in the world's power grids increased 50% year over year in 2016, according to a report by the International Energy Agency. Between 70 gigawatts and 75 gigawatts of solar power came online, with close to half of those installations coming in China, where solar capacity more than doubled last year.
Well,
should we?
I could talk here, but let's move on to the next one.
Okay, good enough. Now we have an item from which this is an interview, and it appears in a publication called One Step Off the Grid.
It's hard to make notes on an interview.
Yes.
It's a good interview, But you really got to hear both sides of the conversation.
Absolutely, and you know, but people can go to geoharvey.com, go to the 4th of July, click on this. Have you got a title on this?
I'm trying to figure out which one I've got here. This is, I think, this is from One Step Off the Grid?
Yep.
Yeah. Banking on wind power. Inside a milestone renewable energy deal.
Goldman Sachs became the first U.S. bank to sign a large-scale power purchase agreement for off-site renewable energy. The agreement will make it possible to build a new 68-megawatt wind farm in Pennsylvania. Goldman Sachs has established a goal to get 100% of its energy from renewable sources by 2020.
Goldman Sachs is leading the charge here.
Yeah.
You know,
why do you suppose they're doing that? My bet is because they can save money.
Save or make.
Yeah.
Yep, I hear you. The times they are changing.
They are.
Let's move into Wednesday.
Okay, this is July 15th.
Got a nice picture coming
And we
up
have
here,
pictures
too.
here. It's not such a nice picture. I deny what you just said. But it is from inside
It
Climate
is until you
News.
look at it and realize what it really is.
Whoa.
Cutting
Okay.
forests for palm oil plantations.
Yeah.
Didn't we have a guy here on the show that was involved
Yes,
with palm oil?
Tomas Fricka.
Yeah.
That's right. In
Very early
Indonesia.
on.
Yes. Yep.
From beef to palm oil, investors worry about climate risk in the food industry.
Yeah. Over the last several months, historic shareholder resolutions have pushed oil giants, including Exxon, to disclose climate-related risks. These are risks to the investors.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
I own part of this company. I want to know what the risk is that you people are taking.
And the
Okay.
companies haven't been that forthcoming.
No, they have
And
not
the
wanted to do it.
Shareholders are suing them.
Yep, and in Exxon, a majority of the shares voted to have reports given. Food companies are next, experts say, whether they use or produce palm oil, corn, soy, or beef, to name some of the biggest climate impacts. And this is it's interesting to see the investors are getting after the companies to tell them where the risks are and how big those risks are.
That makes sense.
It
They're
makes
going to be
perfect
putting their
sense.
money on the line.
Absolutely.
They want to know they're going to make some money on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, you've got somebody like Rex Tillerson, who was CEO of Exxon, and he told the people a year ago last March in the shareholders meeting, you don't have to worry about stranded assets. We aren't going to have any stranded assets.
Duh.
And then, like 3 months later, all of a sudden they announced that something like 2.5 billion barrels, I don't remember exactly how many it was, but it was over 2 billion barrels of oil, were not going to be extracted from the Canadian oil shale oil areas because they were economically unfeasible.
Okay.
That's a stranded asset. That's
Absolutely.
But,
Absolutely.
you know,
As not an investor myself, but as an investor, I would want to know that.
I would want to know. They want to know.
I'm
Okay.
going to be investing in a pipeline and there's going to be nothing in it. I don't think that's a good idea.
No, I don't think it is. And somebody invested over $1 billion in Keystone XL, and if it turns out that it's not going to function, it's not going to make any money.
Bingo.
It's just going to be a loss, and that's something that
the
these
article
people
here is
should
interesting. Mostly
consider.
it deals with what's happening in New York State, and the New York State controller playing a big role, Thomas DiNapoli.
Yeah,
It's a good, interesting article about what he's doing.
But it's not just DiNapoli. It's
no.
all over the world. You know, it's
The article is about him, but,
Yeah.
but no, it's his counterpart in virtually every state in America.
yeah, and abroad. I mean, the
And
Church
abroad.
of England is one of the big investors.
It's equal parts to appeal investors and consumers, but it's also a business imperative.
Right. Our next item comes from Euractiv,
Yeah, we got a picture coming up.
which is again also no, it's not for this article. This is Euractiv. I mean, I could put the picture up if you
This
want.
is
The
okay. I
next-
got the wind farm picture in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Okay, this is your active. We'll leave it this way.
What's the
it
title?
is. Commission funds France to Ireland power link that bypasses the UK.
The European Commission has allocated 4 million euros to a project that will link France and Ireland, the French and Irish electric grids, through an undersea cable. The Celtic Interconnector project, which is called an obvious solution, would have a 600-kilometer long undersea cable, and that's about, what, 360 miles?
600 kilometers?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 400 miles.
With a capacity of 700 megawatts.
Well, the obvious solution is to an obvious problem that nobody's seeing. Ireland has been connected to Europe through Great Britain.
Yes.
And Great Britain is talking about words like Brexit.
Brexit.
And the Irish are saying, well, what's going to happen if they Brexit? What's going to happen to that cable, to our connection?
Yep.
So they're bypassing it.
Yep.
They're just saying, now we got an alternative.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. It
Yeah.
is an obvious solution.
And it means, this cable means that Ireland, if the wind isn't blowing, can get electricity from France. And the French, if they need electricity, and their nuclear power plants do not give them everything they need all the time.
No, they don't.
I mean, they had a really cold winter. The nuclear power plants just couldn't produce enough power. And they were saved by wind power. And of course, they've been building out their wind power since then. But
Well, Ireland's not a big country, fortunately.
it has a lot of wind turbines.
They got wind turbines everywhere.
Yeah.
But most of their power is still produced by peat. Not even lignite. In Ireland, they call it turf.
Turf.
And they use it to heat their homes.
I got to tell you something. Peat moss under a microscope is spectacularly beautiful.
Is it really?
Yeah. But peat, nah, I think I'd rather leave it green. Okay,
It was the only source of hydrocarbon they had, really.
Yeah.
They
Should
didn't
we
have any oil. Yeah, let's move on.
move on?
Let's get this picture up that's supposed to have been up already.
Yeah.
Or this is the picture that goes with
That
this
Tom
article.
would have put up already.
Yeah,
This is from the San Luis Obispo.
Obispo.
San,
bishop.
San Luis
St. Louis the
Obispo.
bishop.
Is that what it means?
Yeah.
Anyway, San Luis Obispo Tribune.
Proposed wind farm off the California coast could generate 1,000 megawatts. That's a lot.
It's a lot, and it doesn't
Couple
take
Yankees, anyhow.
Yeah, and it's just a small wind farm compared to what their coast could hold. A wind power project in California aims to capture the Central Coast's wind. Trident Winds proposes to build a farm of 60 to 100 turbines off the coast from Cayucos to north of Piedras Blancas.
I don't know where they are.
I don't either.
This is in the middle of the west coast of California.
The project would have a capacity of 1,000 megawatts. And this project, by the way, would be so far off coast that you wouldn't really see much of it. There's only one end of it.
That's exactly what they say here. It's 20 miles offshore to catch the winds and be out of sight.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's one point where it gets a little nearer the coast, and
you can see it.
Tourists
that's the top of whose castle?
Tourists can go to this place and see the wind turbines
If they want to.
if they want to, and they're willing to pay the admission to the place where they.
Well, buried in here, they don't actually say it, but these are going to be floating wind turbines.
Yes. Yeah.
And the way they say it is the Trident Winds, this company.
Yeah.
Their founder led the company to develop the wind floating foundation for deep water offshore installations.
Right.
So they've got the technology.
They've got the technology.
And they don't have a continental shelf out west like we have here. So
yes.
This is a new way to go.
Yeah, and these floating, the floating offshore wind farms are a new way of doing things, and they're being developed because the price of offshore wind is just going down so fast.
It makes sense.
It makes sense. It's cheaper now than nuclear by a fair margin, and offshore wind, that is. And now these floating offshore wind farms can be used in places like California, Japan.
Yeah, Japan's doing it.
Hawaii.
Well, we talked about that.
Yep, and so forth. So
I want to look at this picture again.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of that picture, there's kind of a ball sitting on a platform. What is it?
It's a skyscraper.
There's two of them there.
It's a skyscraper.
Well, it probably is to look at.
Yeah.
I guess it's some kind of a interconnect.
It's an interconnect, I would guess, and that would probably house, among other things, places where people could live. Okay, we are at the end of the show. Here? We are finished.
Well, let's
Let's do that.
Tell the
Energy
people
Week.
goodbye.
Tell the people goodbye. See you next time.
Still